Greetings YouTube and welcome to the Blue Corner, and in this video I have for you guys a deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard, and it is going to be on Brawler Bang Knuckle Buster deck. Now, this is right now the best version of Narukami that you can play in the game. Knuckle Buster is an insanely good card, although compared to the other power cards of the format he's fair, and I say that largely because while this guy's ability to basically retire 3 units with an attack is really good, it can set back your opponent, and it just straight up screws over certain clans like Aquaforce and Nova Grapplers because they have to commit cards from their hand for the combo plays, and you're taking away those cards for their combo plays. Against clans like Royal Paladin, Gold Paladin, they'll just remake their board, and furthermore, while this retire ability is nice, it's still rather lackluster compared to Restanding and Guard Restriction, which are two of the best, if not the best abilities in Vanguard. But that all being said though, this deck is still very fun to play. I highly recommend anyone who wants to play Narukami to give this deck a shot. It's also relatively inexpensive compared to some other decks. Knuckle Buster and Knuckle Dragon have gone down. They should be no more than 15 bucks a piece at most. Their SPs are probably more, but it should cost you a whole lot to build brawlers. You just would have to find perfect guards for it. And the beauty of this deck is brawlers don't care about running non-brawler cards. In fact, I'm running some really old Narukami cards, such as Draconic Death Scythe in here, but I'm using my OG perfect guards from set 6, and they're reprints in set 9, and you can even use the Eradicator perfect guards. So that being said, let's get started on this deck itself. So my starting Vanguard is Spark Kid Dragoon. His purpose in here is twofold. Number one, his search effect will helpfully get you out of misriding. And secondly, your grade 3 in main grade 3 requires you to use other grade 3s for his effect. So this guy is basically ammo for your Vanguard skill. Then for the big boss of the deck himself, 4 copies of Brawler Bang Knuckle Buster. This card is really good, as already mentioned. His Legion ability is once per turn, you can counterblast 1 and move a Bang Knuckle unit from your hand into the soul, which would be himself and his base form, Bang Knuckle Dragon, to have him gain 5,000 power, and the ability of when this unit attacks, you can target 4 cards your opponent controls and battle them simultaneously. So it's basically an upgrade to Draconic Kaiser Vermilion's sweep effect, where instead of attacking the front row, you can now attack 4 things at once. And much like before, your opponent has to guard for each and every card. The beauty about this guy is, unlike Draconic Kaiser Vermilion in the Blood and his base form Knuckle Dragon, you're not limited to attacking only front row rear guards, which isn't very good nowadays, as decks will generally on average have roughly 18 attackers they can call to the front row to beat your face in, because they'll have their 12 grade 2s, one of which will be ridden, and their 4 grade 3s, one of which will be ridden at minimum. So yeah, that's 18 things in the front row that you have to kill, so they'll just easily replace them. Whereas being able to hit back row units such as 7k boosters, special boosters, and other guys that your opponent wants to keep back there, that's really good. A deck on average runs about 14 grade 1s, but 4 of those are already going to be Sentinels, so they'll almost always never be called. Another set of 4 of those are going to be Stride Enablers, so those are things that you're also never really going to want to call. So when you look at it that way, your opponent has about 8 to 12, roughly in between that, of units that can call to the back row. So if you can just keep killing those things off, your opponent is eventually going to run out of things to boost their attacks with, which allows you to guard easier. And that's what I like about Knuckle Buster, and that will always be the one thing he has over every other Narukami variant. And then his secondary ability is that he is also a cross-ride of Bang Knuckle Dragon, making him the actually only Legion unit that is a cross-ride of another Legion. The static 2k comes up every now and then, mainly because it allows you to guard attacks for less, i.e. your opponent is coming at you with a 16k column. Normally that's a magic number that requires you to use a 10k shield to block it, because you can't block up with a 5, but with Knuckle Buster being cross-ridden, you can actually do that. And many decks do, in fact, only attack with 16k side columns, and then the 19k side column with a 12k booster, but you're going to kill those things with Knuckle Buster anyway. So that's also another thing about him I like. Now, unfortunately, because you're running Knuckle Buster, you have to run Knuckle Dragon. Knuckle Dragon was okay when he initially came out, but that was only when it was BT16 in Japan and Narukami didn't have a whole lot to work with. It was this guy plus Shotgun Blow Dragon as a 2-pronged attack, but Knuckle Dragon is not good anymore. His ability is Counterblast 2 Brawlers to have him gain 5,000 and the ability to attack the front row a la Vermilion. And when he attacks, you can Soul Blast to have him gain 3k. Like, it's okay-ish, but again, nuking the front row is just not as good as it used to be. So that's why this guy's extremely underwhelming. But you run him because he is ammo for your main Legion, and he also gives you that cross-ride base. And then for the grade 2s, 4 copies of Knuckle Buster's Legion Mate Slash Buster. This guy has 2 simple abilities. The first one is he is an 11k attacker if you control a Big Bang Knuckle unit, so that's nice to have. It means you don't have to run the 12k attacker clone. And his second ability is when your Big Bang Knuckle unit hits a card, he gains 3k. And that's the big thing about this guy, or rather this deck, is this card is going to retire multiple things, and at the same time you're going to be swinging with huge side columns, because if you do the math, if Knuckle Buster hits 4 things, then this is going to gain 12,000 power. Coupled with his 11k attack already, this thing's going to be swinging for 23,000 alone. Not factoring in any boosts from Tonfa Brawler in the back row. Again, you're going to be just eating cards from your opponent's hand, or they're going to be taking them. And you're attacking with almost dark irregular level columns, which is actually kind of scary, because I never thought Narukami could pull out those kind of numbers. Your secondary Legion Mate is Brawler Big Bang Slash Dragon. Again, not as many copies of this because you don't want to be Legion into this guy, but they're still there for when you have to. In addition to that, he also gains the 9k whenever you hit something, except this one only requires a Brawler to hit. So if you're forced to, say, ride a Sky Howl because you can't use its Counterblast, you can at least ride it, attack, hit something, and because a Brawler hit, this gains 3k, so you can attack with this 12k side column, which is rather relevant. And speaking of Sky Howl, I am running 2 copies of him. This is just a generic Counterblast 1 when you have a Brawler Vanguard, pick off a front and rear guard. Yeah, it's your generic, what clone with Blaster Blade Seeker clone. There we go. Again, sniping front or rear guards isn't as good as it used to be, but it's still good for getting things like 12k attackers out of the way and interceptors. And then I'm also rocking 2 Dragonic Death Scythes. As you may have noticed, I am rather cheap on Counterblast with my main Vanguard's attack. Knuckle Buster only costs 1, Sky Hall Dragon only costs 1, so I can in fact get away with running a couple Counterblast heavy cards, namely this guy, as being able to pick off back row rear guards is important. I've made that a point several times in this video, and I'm actually probably going to be done harping on that here because this is the last card in the deck that can actually do that. But Death Scythe, again, allows you to pick off back row rear guards, and you can attack a 9k and either kill it or force out a card, so you end up going +2 for a single counterblast, oh, rather 2 counterblasts. And I like +2s. I think they're good. For the grade 1s, my 4 perfect guards, my 4 Rising Phoenixes, because, hey, I have a lot of soul in this deck. And then you got additional draw power and Threatening Brawler Kome, who I seem to have misplaced my 4th copy. How did that even happen? Or is he stuck in there? Nope. There's a 3rd one of this guy in here, but you know what? We're just going to rock it. We'll roll with it. So, okay, still 3 copies of Threatening Brawler Kome. When this thing is called onto rear guard and your opponent has 1 or less rear guards in the front row, you can discard a card and draw a card. Draw power is always nice. Narukami is rather lacking in it, so finding ways to speed up the deck and filter cards is extremely helpful. I'm hoping for the day when this clan gets a Gojo clone. And since you already saw me flip 1 copy, here are the remaining 3 the remaining copies of Tonfa Brawler Arc. This card is really good in the deck. His ability is when a unit your opponent controls is put into the drop zone and your Vanguard is in Legion, he gains 3k. Which is pretty simple in the beginnings, as it doesn't matter how it's killed, it just has to be killed. So you could just attack with a 9k against your opponent's 9k while in Legion, and they let it go, so that thing dies. So now, because that died, this guy gets 3k, so now you're swinging for 19 with this column. But it gets even better, because suppose, if you will, you resolve Knuckle Buster's skill, killing off 3 things while hitting your opponent's Vanguard. Okay, so that means this guy gains additional 9,000 power, putting him at 16,000, while this guy gains an additional 12,000 power, putting him with his ability to 23 plus 16 is 39. That's a big ass column, and your opponent is going to either have to perfect guard that, or they're going to have to take it. And that's what makes Tom for Brawler so good, and that's what allows this deck to just eat cards away from your opponent. But honestly, in the future though, I'm probably going to end up dropping him for Stride Enablers, as I feel that's a far more important thing to have for this deck when we get Conquest Dragon and Zoras. For the triggers, I'm running 6 crits featuring 4 Malevolent Djinns, because building up a soul for your Rising Phoenix is kind of nice. 6 draw, and then 4 heal. I don't think there's really a whole lot I can say about the trigger ratios. I like to run draw triggers in either 4, 5, or 6. And right now I'm running 6 because I value drawing cards more than hitting crits. But that'll change when the Stride format comes out, and I will end up needing crits to help finish up stuff. But that's all I really got to say on this deck. If you're an Arakami fan, by all means, feel free to give me thoughts on how you would probably improve upon this deck. And are you also, like me, super hyped for BTG2 when we get to play with a better version of this, where you can run Voltage Horn Dragons in place of Death Scythe and Sky Howl in some of these, and Shatura, who will let you draw cards? Are you excited to be playing with Stride Arakami with Eradicators, being able to get more restanding? Or are you also like me, who is super hyped for the revival of Narakami's Avatar, Kaiser Vermilion? This deck is going to be so fun to play moving forward, and I can't wait for that. But that'll all be then in May. Until now, though, I'm going to stick with the Brawl Brothers, who do one thing and one thing very well. They're going to punch and kick you in the dick. Why? I don't know, but they're just going to do that. And all I have to say is, poor Vegeta.